Alright, I'm gonna try to definitively answer the age-old question of what the hardest sport in the world is. Wish me luck. So what are some frontrunners? Gymnastics, for obvious reasons. Hurling, an Irish person suggested that it's a niche Irish sport that is played by crazy people. Tennis, which is deceptively hard actually. I'm fairly athletic and I usually pick up sports with no problem, but tennis took me a while. Hockey, for sheer complexity. American football, for the physicality. Basketball, football, martial arts, boxing, the list goes on. So how can you definitively answer which one's the hardest? Because they've all got their strengths and weaknesses. This is an age-old argument and one I've had countless times with countless different people. Oddly enough, arguing in favor of different sports. For example, with my hockey friends, I'd argue football is the hardest, and with my football friends, I'd argue hockey is actually the hardest. The point is, I'm a contrarian prick that likes to debate. No, but the point is, I've argued many sides of this, and won, by the way. Losing is not something I'm familiar with. But which side is right? My new argument is, none of them. They're all equally hard. End of argument. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Also, leave a comment why you think I'm wrong. Bye. Wow, that joke just falls flat without a recognizable outro. I am getting to it, but in all seriousness though, how are all sports equally hard? Right, so I should probably explain. But before I do, pause the video and try to guess what my reasoning is going to be to yourself as a bit of a thought exercise. Because, as Einstein said, a man who reads, or in this case, listens too much and uses his brain too little, falls into lazy habits of thinking. So here's why I think every sport is equally hard. But before we do that, let's begin by defining sport. A sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill which an individual or team competes in against another or others for entertainment. Keyword being competes, so a sport by definition is a competition. If it weren't, it would just be an exercise like going to the gym. So my argument is that every sport is equally difficult because what makes a sport hard or difficult isn't the technical complexity but the competition. What is the hardest sport is a question that's always been doomed to failure because of how vague it is. It can be interpreted in a different way by everyone, so you end up arguing completely different points. And as Carl Jung said, to ask the right question is already half the solution to a problem. Let's step into the matrix construct for a second. What is hard? How do you define hard? How do you measure difficulty? Is it relative to skill level? Effort? If we're going by effort, I could argue that it takes just as much effort for an overweight person to beat their own record jogging around the block as it does for the greatest long distance runner of all time to beat his own record. Or for a tennis example, it takes just as much effort for Nadal to beat Federer as it does for you to beat someone slightly better than you. Or are we going by skill level? If we do go by skill level relative to what? The skill required? Okay, sure. Let's use this as an example. Let's take a basketball hoop and instead of having it 3 meters up, have it 10 meters up so it looks like something the do-perfect guys would take their trick shots on. And then let's enforce that as a rule for everyone. By all counts, that's extremely difficult, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, it's definitely harder to score now than it was when the hoop was 3 meters up, but just because it's harder to score does not make the game of basketball harder as a sport. In football, the average goal for a game per team is 3 goals. And in hockey, it's also 3 goals, but they do it in 60 instead of 90. Does that mean football is harder than hockey, just because it's harder to score? Or, for example, in basketball, a team makes about 50 shots per game. Does that make basketball 30 times easier than football or hockey? No, because the difference is in basketball, yes, you can score 50, but the opposition is also going to score 50. Just as in football or hockey, you're going to score 3, but the opposition is also going to score 3. And this all leads back to my point. Difficulty in sport is not relative to complexity, it's relative to competition. When it comes to the most technically complex sport, the answer is simple: hockey. Hockey is the fastest sport in the world. Good skaters can generally skate twice as fast as they can run, and on top of that, American football style hits are allowed, which means players are hitting each other going twice as fast as they would be running. And then comes skating. Skating alone is more complex than any skill required in most major sports. I'm just gonna come out and say that right now. And that's all before even mentioning handling a small rubber puck with a stick. So does that make it the hardest sport in the world? I say no. Hardest to pick up? Definitely. But not the hardest to become world class in. And that's the question we should be asking. Not how hard is it to pick up, but how hard is it to become the best in the world or world class, meaning 99th percentile. For example, for me, picking up baseball was super easy, barely an inconvenience. I have no doubt I could hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, given enough tries of course. But the difference is I wouldn't be able to connect 1 in 3 times I step to the plate like someone who's world class at baseball would be able to do, and forget hitting it out of the park. Where hockey runs into trouble is, well, 1, 80% of the countries around the world don't even know it exists, never mind playing it. 2, from the countries that do know it exists and do play it and are actually good at it, majority of the people, aka the best athletes, are simply priced out because of just how expensive hockey is. That diminishes the already small pool of competition down even further. At this point, hockey is basically just a pastime for rich white kids and not, this is what will get me and my family out of poverty kind of thing. When it comes down to it, there's something to be said for a favela mentality. Contrast that with baseball where all you really need is a bat, a ball, and a glove, and you can play anywhere. It's the reason it's in the top 10 for most popular sports in the world. But baseball has its own set of problems that makes it easy. But to explain that, I have to first explain my sport evolution of competition theory. So in most sports, first people compete on skill, and if skill is equal, then the better athlete wins, so people compete on athleticism. And then, depending on the tactical complexity of the sport, people compete on intelligence, or IQ if you prefer. But in some sports where a genetic deformity can give you an advantage, it becomes Darwinian, to a point where you need that genetic trait to be able to even compete, ironically making the sport less competitive. The perfect example of this is basketball. Up until the 1940s, basketball was thought to be the sport of the short, mobile man, and the tall players were considered to be bad at basketball because they couldn't keep up with the short, elusive players. As you can probably guess, that did not last long. A 6'10" guy with the name of George Mikan came into the league and just dominated everybody so badly that they actually had to change the rules because of him. And since then, coaches have caught on and the league has gotten taller and taller ever since, to a point where now the average height is 6'7" and anything under 6'3" is basically considered too short. And since that's more than 96% of the world, that means only 4% of potential athletes are even competing for it, allowing players like Dirk, Embiid, Rodman, Olajuwon, etc. to discover basketball late in their teen years, not only to make the best league in the world, but have superstar Hall of Fame careers. That just doesn't happen in any other major sport. And then there's the crazy stat of if you're above 6'10" between 20 and 40, there's a 1 in 5 chance of you being already in the NBA, the best league in the world for that sport. It's mind-boggling really. Baseball has a similar problem where vision rules all. To play baseball, you not only have to see exactly where a 90-mile-per-hour pitch is going, you also have to see the spin of the ball to judge which way it's curving. And for that, 20/20, which is considered perfect vision, simply doesn't cut it. You need superhuman eyesight to make it in the big leagues. So 20/20 for an adult is considered perfect vision, 20/30 is considered worse, and majority of the world has worse than 20/20. But baseball players, well, baseball players are freaks. 28 is what's considered humanly possible, and baseball players on average have 20/12. Some of the best hitters have 20/10 and 20/9, and there have even been players tested as 28. Basically, that's what you need to compete, and that takes the majority of the world just out of the question. Both baseball and basketball are in the top 10 in terms of popularity around the world, but in terms of competition, I'd put them probably even lower than hockey, and I would say they're the weakest of the major sports. So that brings us to answering the question of what the hardest sport in the world is. Easy. Football, or soccer if you prefer. It is by far the most popular sport in the world and the most competitive. 1, it's extremely cheap to play and all you need is a ball. You don't even need to create an organization, you can just play pickup anywhere. 2, it doesn't suffer from a genetic freakism problem. Anybody can play it. Tall, short, fast, slow, strong, scrawny, anybody really. It's all down to your skills. And even that isn't always a given because since football is so tactically complex as a sport, players with inferior technical ability can make it on the basis of their intelligence and work rate. So literally anybody can make it. So not only is it the most popular sport in the world, but every player that plays it has a chance of making it, meaning only the true best of the best can make it. It's baffling when you think about it because this is allegedly the hardest sport in the world, and the English Premier League is the hardest league in the world, yet Giroud is playing in it. Yikes. Just goes to show no sport is perfect. Anyways, that's my definitive answer to the question of what the hardest sport in the world is. So tell me, am I wrong? Did I miss something completely? Am I just being biased because football is my favorite sport, with hockey coming in a close second? Please, leave your arguments in the comment section. Like I said, I am always up for a debate. And anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because that helps a lot apparently. And no, I still haven't figured out a proper outro yet. I'm getting to it.